Hi, John. Are you in?
Yes, I am.
Good. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Jerry, is there anybody else on your side that's coming to the session today?
No, it's just Becky and I.
Just you two? Okay. Well, I'll record this session for everybody, so that way when we're done, I'll send it out to you, so that way you can revisit it as much as you need.
Perfect.
And I have Johnny Woodward, with us today. He's my sales engineer for the 100 product. Has a wealth of knowledge in the product, over 25 years experience, both as an end user and as an engineer here for us at Sage. So there's not much he hasn't seen over that span of time in the way of using the product. So he's very instrumental in these presentations. And I did brief John on who you guys were and what you were looking to do in terms of the 7 corporate locations that you have, and then I think it was 60 franchises that you're accounted for, and then how you operate around those. Basically just looking at financials today, and I did put together a brief agenda. Usually John will start out with the overview and navigation of 100, and then kind of touch on the AP and AR GL modules. I kind of go through GL segments for you guys. I know invoicing is a big thing for you, vendors, bank rec, and then the checks you're writing out for royalties to some of the other franchises. And then we'll kind of follow up at the end with security and permissions, as well as reporting. As far as an agenda, is there anything that I may have left out?
Nope, not that I can think of.
That looks pretty good. Okay. John, I will make you the presenter. Give me just a moment.
Okay.
There you go.
Can you verify? You should be seeing my screen with Information Center, a little off center, but pretty much in the center of the screen.
Yes.
Now, before I get going, I just want to kind of point out this looks small to me, probably looks small to you. One of the things I want to show you first is user has control over that. They don't have to go get an admin. So I'm going to go to this View tab and notice this application scaling. So right now I'm set to default. So notice again, let me just open this screen up. So that scaling also is reflected in the screen size of anything that I open, a data entry, inquiry, maintenance screen. I'm going to change from that up to large. Notice the fonts for the menus got bigger, and if I go back and open that same window, it's going to be quite a bit bigger. So this is something that's kind of a user preference tool that each user can set the scaling where they can see the system, so they can read the menus and easily navigate through the system. So that's kind of a nice tool because they don't have to go get an admin to change things. If you want it bigger, maybe you forgot your glasses in the next room or in your car, just take your application scaling up to the next size, see if you can read it, or if you have to go run to the car right now. So it just gives you the opportunity to kind of get a larger screen. Now, we'll kind of check. You'll notice that extra large is grayed out. So based on my laptop doesn't have the resolution to support that scaling. If I was on a bigger monitor, I could potentially even go to extra large to even get a larger size than what we're seeing now. So we'll kind of check what your device can support, and we'll enforce that. But, it's quite a bit of difference going from default to large there, so it's a lot easier to read. Other things that I can do on here, notice the modules here and the menus. If you prefer that to be sorted alphabetically, just, if you're looking for AP or AR, it may be easier to find that if it's alphabetized. So you can sort the modules alphabetically, the module menus, and then even the task underneath the menus can be sorted alphabetically. And again, I've been around the system so long, I just, I need it to be where it's always been, not alphabetical, so I can find things. So I turn those off. But that, again, is another user preference. And while I'm here, another thing users can do is they're kind of like predefined themes. So you notice it changes the color combinations of the menus and the screens. So this may be another thing that, staring at the screen all day long, a particular color combination may just be easier for you to read. If it's in the different contrasted colors, that gives users the ability to kind of pick the one that's best for them. Or maybe you're bored and just want to change things up. Any questions on this? And again, this is all, any changes I make here wouldn't affect any other users, my specific preferences.
No question.
All right. Now, Sage 100 is modular. While I'm here, Library Master is the control module. So depending on how you set up, whether you just have one company you're tracking or if you need to set up multiple companies to track within Sage 100, this is where you can define all the companies. I have 12 different companies. Some are copies of other companies that I do to test, but you can have multiple companies in one Sage database. So that's all set up and defined under company maintenance. Other things, different things, preferences for companies, payment, do you need accept credit card payments, ACH, email details, things of that nature can be defined here as well. Library Master is also where I will establish users and security, and Sage 100 security is based on a role. So instead of going in and defining person by person, this person has access to do these things and they don't have access, what you do is define a role, AP clerk, controller, accounting, manager, whatever you need as far as you would define the job or the role a person performs, and then associate the permissions that type of user would have. So a system admin, I have access to everything. If I go and look at the sales, notice how there's a significantly less checkboxes going on here for a sales rep versus the sysadmin. So that just gives you the ability to kind of define, this type of user is going to need this. Now underneath, I'll kind of go and expand AP as an example. So this under AP, I can just give everyone with the checkbox access to everything in AP, or I can, start to uncheck. Maybe there's certain things that they wouldn't have access. So I can check everything and go uncheck the exception, or just go turn on the specific things that they would need access to. Now, something I want to point out too is notice maintenance. Now, typically, if I give someone access to a maintenance task, in this case, vendor maintenance, they can create a new vendor. They can modify an existing one. There's a delete button, but there's some caveats on delete. I can't accidentally delete a vendor. If there's open, open invoices and open balances, it's not going to let you just delete if there's open, open activity. But I want to expand this. If you have roles, maybe vendors have to be approved. Maybe only certain users can create a new vendor. So I could create a role where create is enabled for some and disabled for others, so that only those people who are allowed to create a new vendor would have create a new vendor as an option when they're in that task. Otherwise, they could pull up an existing one or view the records, but not create. But again, that's up to you as far as whether giving access to maintenance is everything, or they have restricted types of activities they can do when they're there. Any questions?
Nope, that's clear. Good.
Okay, all right. Now, after that, I'm just going to go into the user setup themselves. You would define the user. And if you end up with more than one company, what you'll see in this case, I can define the user login, associate the login with the user, their first name and last name, associate the password. And then down here, you'll notice if you do have, just one company, you can say that company and what role they have. Or if you end up with more than one company and they have this, that same role across all companies, I can just say all companies, sysadmin role, or make it, specific to the company. And another thing here, this user code, that is going to follow me. So when I log into the system, if I go into accounts receivable and create a new customer record, my user code is going to be associated with the creation of that customer record. If I change sometime later down the road, I change that record. Maybe I change the terms code or change the credit limit or put them on credit hold. My user code is going to be associated with that activity. And there's even audit trails that you can track changes, so that if I do end up with a record being changed and I want to know, who made that change and when and what was the value before, I can run audit reports that will show me who made the change, the date of the change, the value before the change, and the value after. So you can kind of track that through the system. And that user code, kind of keep in mind, is when you assign the user code, that is going to be your detective tool. That's what's going to follow the user and identify who did what in the system. Questions?
So with that, you have to turn that audit function on?
Now, normally when you set up the system, so let me kind of show you, for example, under inventory maintenance, it's kind of the same thing. What you'll do is in every module setup, you'll have the option to track changes. So when you say track changes, let me go in here, track all and in detail. So it's just a matter of saying, yes, I want to track that. And the level of detail, maybe you just want to check track deletions, additions, or, or everything. So you can kind of say whether you want, what type of activity you want to track, all or specific ones, and whether you want it just to be summarized or you want to know that who did what, when, what was the value before, and the value after. So that's kind of a case-by-case or module-by-module option that you enable.
And does that slow the system down by having that?
Nope, shouldn't at all. Now, one of the things, Brian, are you on Sage 15 now?
I have an instance of it. I can pull it up.
Well, no, I mean, are you coming to 100 from Sage 15? Or?
No, they're
okay.
All their accounting is being done by third party, so they're coming over.
Okay. So there's another system that Sage has that has some file size limitations. Sage 100 files can get as big as they need to, so that tracking those changes doesn't add any additional detail that Sage 100 cannot handle, because there's a lot more data that's captured elsewhere in the system that, and to be honest, based on the modules, like inventory is usually a module that creates most of the data files with a lot of detail, and we're not even looking at that. So I don't anticipate any problems at all because Sage 100 doesn't have any file size limitations. So a file in Sage 100 can grow as big as it needs to accommodate your transactional history.
Okay.
Now, getting around the system, I've been in some of the modules, but I want to kind of point out Sage 100 is modular. You would only see, I have all the modules installed. You would only see the modules that you've actually purchased and installed in the system. So you wouldn't necessarily see inventory, sales order, bill of materials. That listing of modules would be streamlined based on what you have purchased and what you've installed. And I'll point out too that security will actually act as a filter. A user will only see the modules, the menus, and the task the security allows them to access. So a user, first of all, you'd probably only have financials, not all the things you see here. But if you have just an AP clerk, all they would see is the AP menu. They wouldn't see GL or library master. They would only see specifically what modules they have access to. Questions?
Nope, that makes perfect sense.
Okay. All right. Now, the structure, let me kind of I'll go to GL as an example. So in this case, you'll see what we call the module menus, main, reports, budget, period, and setup. Everything except budget and payroll services is standard. So AP is going to have a main, AP is going to have reports, AP will not have budget, period end. AR and AP is going to have main, reports, period end, setup, utilities, and explore. Budget and payroll services are unique to GL. If I go to AP, you're going to see kind of the same thing. You're going to see main, reports. Now, in AP's case, it has some options that don't exist in GL or AR. Check printing, electronic payment, pre-note printing, part of the AP process, generating payments to pay vendors, paper checks, ACH payments, pre-notes associated with the ACH payments. I don't need those menus anywhere else. So you will find unique menus that only exist in some places, but it's based on functionality only needed in that particular module. Now the main folders, if I come back up here, main is always going to have specific types of tasks. Main is always going to have maintenance, inquiry, and data entry. So for AP, we see here vendor maintenance, vendor inquiry, invoice history inquiry, payment history inquiry. Then I start to get into data entry, repetitive invoice entry, invoice data entry, manual check entry. And then again, if I needed to do data entry or maintenance in AR, I would go to the main folder there. So again, in this case, customer maintenance, customer inquiry, invoice history inquiry, then again, getting into data entry. So it won't be hard to figure out where to go to figure out if you have data entry to do, it's going to be in the main folder. Maintenance task, main folder. Inquiry, main folder. And of course, reports and everything else is kind of self-explanatory about where you'll find specific detail. Now, any questions there?
No.
Now, you won't always have to navigate between, let's say, if you do, let's say work all of accounting, GL, AR, AP, sometimes you're doing AR invoicing, sometimes you're doing AP invoice data entry, sometimes you're doing a GL transaction entry. Those things that you are doing on a regular basis, you can flag as a favorite, and you can build your own favorites menu, which is basically shortcuts to the things that you are using all the time. So as an example, let me just pick I'll say an obscure report, but more than likely I will already have added this report to my favorites menu, but I'll show you. I'll just take the cache expectation report. So let's say that this is a report that I'm running on such a frequent basis that I want to flag it as a shortcut or a favorite. So I'm going to right click and notice add to favorites as an option. Before I make the selection, notice that my focus here is still modules. As soon as I say add to favorites, it will open up my favorites menu and drop that new item onto the bottom. And I've already added it at some point, which was my expectation. So I can go ahead and delete it because I've already added it. Now, if I had another nickname for that report, I could right click. I could also rename it to apply my nickname to my favorites folder. It wouldn't affect it in the main menu, just on my favorites menu. And you'll notice at the top, I have applied some organization. So as I've added my favorites, I said I want to kind of group things together. So I don't want to, make some organize my favorites menu and to make it make more sense. So you can see that I have these little lines and then some folders. So those lines are called separators. So to insert a line, I just say insert separator. If I need a folder, I'd say insert folder. And what I can do is take that report that I just added and drop it into that folder, since it's an AR report. And I probably already have it here at some point. No, yeah, I do. So I can go ahead and delete the duplicate. So this gives you or your users the ability to identify those things that you use most frequently, flag it as a favorite, have that drop onto your favorites menu. Once it's on the favorites menu, you can apply your nickname to that or keep it as the original name. And then you can apply any organization as far as grouping things together. As you see, AR things, AP things, inventory, PO, GL. So those things are kind of grouped together, but those core things that I use all the time. So I don't have to navigate from GL to AR to et cetera. The module menus, everything that I use frequently is on my favorites menu. Now, the maintenance is always done on this lower pane. I'm going to go back to modules and notice at the top there's a favorites tab, and this is going to display at the top so I can have those things that I use all the time docked at the top waiting for the next time I need it. So again, to avoid going from AR main to GL reports to AP, period end processing, et cetera. Anything that I use frequently, I can have at the top on my favorites menu. And if I drop it into a folder, it's just a matter of clicking the drop-down box, and then I can pull the item from the drop-down. Questions?
No.
All right. One other way to get around the system, we call them visual process flows. So let me go. In this case, instead of being module-based, it's kind of functionality. So customer billing, invoice and receipt payment, this is AR, invoice and receipt payment. Instead of this folder-driven navigation, it's a visual map-driven process. So instead of, again, like over here, the folders and file menu type structure, this is kind of a mapped out process from beginning to end. Step one, enter an AR invoice, print the invoice, post the invoice, apply payments to invoices, customer maintenance, related inquiries, related reports. So this isn't just a help screen. It actually has linked the text and the buttons are linked to the task. So if I need to access customer maintenance to create or maintain an existing customer, either the text or the button will actually launch that function. So I can go maintain a customer if I need to. If I need to do AR invoice data entry, that will launch AR invoice data entry. So this is kind of nice in that for a new user to the system who's unfamiliar with maybe the process and the order that things should occur, this actually shows you that process from beginning to end in the order in which it normally occurs. AR as an example, and again, we kind of have this across the board. I can drop down here to vendor payments, invoice and process payment. This is going to be the AP side, AP invoice data entry, selecting invoices for payment, generating the payments, posting the payments, vendor maintenance, related inquiries, related reports, even into, how do I prepare accounts receivable for period end close? This kind of gives you the guideline of the steps to prepare AR to close the accounts receivable accounting period. Then you can even see, we can go into GL prepping GL for close, all the reports, all the things you need to do, and then the actual closing process for GL in the order that it should occur. Now, what's nice about these, we provide these templates, but if your process is different, if you need access to another function, or it'd be easier or more convenient, or you'd be more efficient if there was access to do something else here, these can actually be modified to add or remove buttons. So I could add a button to launch additional things. If there's a website you need to go out and look at, I can create a link to launch web pages within the visual process flows as well. Questions?
No, I like it.
Now, there's some things that come bundled with Sage 100. Let me ask you this, like when you are generating invoices, customer invoices, do you do invoices and statements for customers?
No, we don't really do a lot of, we don't do a lot of invoicing. We just mainly would invoice our franchisees for their royalties. And there's a couple other things that we invoice them for. So we don't do a lot of it, but we would probably use the AR module, depending on how easy it is and if it makes sense.
Well, let me kind of show you what I would get, a feature that comes with Sage 100. There's a module called Paperless Office. So where you do need to send a document to a customer or even vendors, and even capturing document accounting transactions, let me kind of show you. In the customer record, we have paperless. So should you need to send an invoice or a statement to a customer, for example, AR invoice, they want it emailed, I go to the email tab, and this is where I can specify when I email an invoice, which contacts at that customer should get a copy of that invoice. So it's essentially customer by customer, document by document. I can say, do they want a paper copy, an email? If you have someone that still wants a fax, we can do a fax. And when I go to print, I can basically select an output option on the print job that says print PDF and electronic delivery, so that if a hard copy is required, it will print the hard copy. If an email is required, it will generate the email and attach the PDF of the invoice and send the email out. And you can also create a copy of that invoice and save it internally, so you have a PDF copy of the document as well. So that will be for invoices and statements. And on the vendor side, if you issue purchase orders and even check remittance advice, can be specific instructions on how to deliver those documents to the vendors. Okay. So paperless is just comes automatically. Now let me kind of show you. If I go to paperless, it will create an archive. So customer view, or the invoices, would be could be found here under, as you generate them, it's going to save it to an archive and you'd be able to pull it up here. Another thing I'll point out here is it's not just limited to, journals and registers. So this is the audit trail, if you will, of the accounting transaction. So cash receipts register, sales journal, GL transaction journals can be, the associated paperwork for that transaction can be generated to PDF and saved electronically. So instead of having to try to find something from a filing cabinet, you can come into the viewer and actually use the binoculars and say, it was an AP transaction, and then search by the journal number, the posting date, the date range to find what you're looking for, versus having to try to find that in a filing cabinet. So period end reports you want an archive copy of, customer documents and vendor documents can be stored as PDF so that you have that backup copy should you need to retrieve that for to send a copy to the customer, or maybe in the case of an audit, here's the documentation associated with that accounting transaction. Questions?
No.
Right. Now there's some tools, another set of tools, another tool to be aware of. Visual Integrator is a tool that comes bundled with Sage 100. It is an import-export tool. This is probably something that's going to be utilized in the beginning of the setup, so that instead of going directly into Sage 100 and having to, let's say, define the chart of accounts, your chart of accounts will more than likely be created in a spreadsheet and then imported. So what this tool enables me to do is map Sage 100 to an external file. Let me just see here. Just do a new one here. So I'm going to create a new one. Let's just say, and then what I would do is point this to the GL table that has the GL accounts. So I will be just looking at, let me see here. There we go. And then I'll map to the file source. This is where I can say what my file type is, whether it's an Excel, comma delimited, tab delimited. So I'm just going to say Excel. And then from there, I can map Sage 100 to where to find information in that spreadsheet. So basically telling Sage 100, you'll find the account description in column 1 for a length of 50. The account number will be in column 2 for a length of 41. So I'm basically just, again, pointing Sage 100 to the spreadsheet and saying, this is where you'll find this type of information, when then that, and then I can import it into the system. So again, in the setup of your system, this is probably going to be a tool that's going to be utilized heavily in the implementation to create the chart of accounts, to create your list of customers, to create your list of vendors, open invoices, open orders, etc. Versus having to key all that information in the system. It's most likely going to be imported from a spreadsheet. Questions?
No, that makes sense.
And it's not just for use in the beginning. If at any point in the future you have another external system where data is captured or provided that you need to pull into Sage 100, you can always use this. Anywhere I can type into Sage 100, I can import. Let me ask you this. Payroll, is payroll something that's outsourced?
Yes.
So payroll, you're not doing payroll, but there's going to be GL entries. There's going to be GL entries that need to be recorded for each payroll run. So what typically happens in after the initial setup, this is an example where Sage 100 this tool is used a lot, and you get a file from your payroll provider, and then we can map to that file provided by your payroll service provider, and then basically that import would create the GL entries associated with that payroll run. So that's something that, again, you don't have to go in every payroll run and manually do a GL entry to account for that. If you can get a file from your payroll service provider, we can map to that and create an import to create the GL entries associated with that payroll run. Questions?
And that is also how we would do the import from our point of sale?
More than likely, yes. Anything where there's an external system where you need to get at the point of sale, like the GL transactions associated with sales, if that system can create a file, and again, Excel, comma delimited, tab delimited, CSV, we can map to that and then import from that file.
Okay.
So that's a tool, again, that can be used going forward, not just, in the initial setup. Let's see here. Now, there's some other things that may come into play. Custom Office is a tool that enables you, should you need to create a field that doesn't exist. If you need information, if you need a field to put information in that we didn't give you a place for, this tool allows you to create a custom field. We call it a user-defined field. So now I think based on royalties, we will probably have to utilize this tool to create a field to identify something as royalties apply, as an example. So I could create a field with a checkbox that just says royalties apply, or other types of fields, but I can see that. So what I would do here is I would go to user-defined field and table maintenance. And if that is, again, anything that I need, instead of having what I see in the specific industries, there's always something unique to like an industry. or your business, where we provide what most people need, the basics to create a customer record, a vendor record, a geo account. But based on specific business or industries, there's different types of data or information you may need that we just didn't know you needed. And instead of having to create a spreadsheet and start keeping additional information and tagging the spreadsheet to track that additional information, I can actually go to AR and let's say a customer, like a customer record type detail. I can go to the customer master file, which is where, the customer record would be. And I can simply say edit, and then I can create a custom field from scratch here to define that information that I need to associate with the customer record. So instead of having to define it in a spreadsheet and keep it outside the system, I can actually add a field to Sage 100, so that becomes a field for the customer record. So here I already have 9. That's not even close to the limit. And I can just say add, and I can just say, I'll just say demo 88. So I can name it anything I want. I'm going to go to the OK tab. So now I can say, do I need a text box so I can type a note or just type anything into a text box? Do I want to provide a list and select, basically select the value from a list? Do I need to be a list box, a checkbox? Do I need a date? So if I go back to multi-line, I can make a date. That would give me the ability to pick a date from a calendar button. So this kind of, again, allows you, if you need a field to track data that we didn't give you a place for, this allows you to add it to, in this case, a customer record, and it will become a part of the database. I can add it to the screen. I can add it to reports. From here on out, that would be a data field that you have access to. Questions so far?
Nope.
I'm going to leave it as a text field, and then I'm going to hit OK. So the next thing you're going to see is it's going to add, that field is now being added to the table, the database, the lookups. It's going to be a part of the system from here on out. I'll be able to add that to the screen. I'll do that later when we get into the customer record to show you how we can add that custom field on the customer record. But it's built right into the system. So it's not external programming. It's built right into Sage 100. So this enables me to be able to add that field and have it in the system, add it to reports. And because it's not custom programming, when I upgrade the system and go from, let's say one version to the next, the system knows how to upgrade it. So it doesn't have to be recreated when you upgrade versions. Questions?
Okay.
All right. So let's get in. I'm going to start with GL. So let me ask you this. Do you know on your chart of accounts how many segments is in your GL, in the GL accounts now?
I think it is just 2 segments for location and account number.
And is that capturing enough detail, or do you need, would another segment be more, give you more ability to capture?
That's one of the things that we'll have to think about as to whether we want to add like a sub account or.
Let me show you this is my demo data. You don't have to use this format, but this is how my demo data. We have customers that have 1 segment, some with 2. In this case, my demo is set up for 3. It can support up to 32 characters and 10 segments. So it can be very complex if it's needed. I've heard no one jump up and down and say that they were going to do 10 segments and 32 characters. Usually what we see is like, 2 to 3 is probably the norm, maybe some 4, but it can be more, much more complex if needed. So in this case, I have my main account. My second segment is set up to represent department, and the third segment is set up to represent locations. So again, you can keep the 2 segments if that's sufficient, or you can add 3. What's nice is, let's say you keep the 2, and then sometime down the road you say a third segment would really help us, get more detail in the GL. That can always be done later. There is a utility that would allow you to add segments down the road. So that's something that you would be able to accomplish later down the road after implementation if you see the need, or it can be done as a part of the implementation process. So let me kind of go in and kind of show you. Of course, my main account would be, pretty straightforward here. 115 inventory, receivables, et cetera. So when I define the segment description, the group, the category, the account type, cash flow type, status, start and end date, if applicable, can be assigned to that main account. If I get into the sub-accounts, this is where I can define what that, department location, the sub-accounts, the individual department, so 10 represent sales and marketing, those details. And of course, as I scroll through, I'm just defining all the sub-accounts and which segment it's associated with. Questions?
No, probably we'll have it when you get to like journal entries.
Okay, I'm going to go up to account. So account maintenance is where I define the actual accounts. Now you'll notice inquiry. Anytime you see maintenance versus inquiry, maintenance means I can create, I can maintain, I can delete. Inquiry is always view only. So someone who needs to see information, but that user you wouldn't necessarily want to be able to make changes. You can always grant them access to the inquiry task and not the maintenance task. Inquiry is always view only. They would never be able to make any kind of change to that account setup. Maintenance, again, gives me access. So let's say I know the account starts with a value. You can key in what you know and then hit the magnifying glass or F2, and that's like a begins with filter, so it's showing me everything that begins with 115. You can always use the lookup, and within the lookup, you can use what you know. For example, let's say description contains it'll give me every occurrence where, every account that has cash in the description. So this it gives you the flexibility, again, based on what you know. You can search on, account number, status, description. And these lookups can be customized to add more fields. If more fields would be helpful to find what you're looking for, I can add more values or more columns of data to be able to search for the account I'm looking for. Another thing you have the ability to do is, if you know the description, you can actually start to type that description into the account number field, and then you get a listing under the bottom there, all the accounts and then the account number. So the description and then the account number. The more specific you get, the narrower that selection becomes. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one. So on the main tab, I have my account group, category, type, status, start and end date, cash flow type if applicable. History gives me the ability to see my history, beginning balance, debits, credits, ending balance. Now, this little button here, instead of the individual debits and credits, gives me the net change. So I can toggle that on or off. I can look at any year in history. And if I get a variance, now in this case, this account has a budget. So I'm seeing the original budget versus activity and variance. If I have a budget revision, I can select the revised budget versus the original, compare it to the activity, get variance. Now, let's say it's an account that doesn't have a budget, then maybe I want to look at a different year's activity. Comparing, in this case now, I'm comparing prior year activity to the current year and seeing various details. If you do have accounts that need budgets associated with them, I have a budget button. I can establish the budget right within the GEO account. Original budget, I have one revision here. You have unlimited budget revisions available. Some tools to select, change, calculation wizards, clearing budget, resetting cells that can be utilized. Now, this is kind of a very basic budgeting tool, so you can have a budget associated with the GEO account. There's an add-on module called Sage Budgeting and Planning if you need more advanced budgeting capabilities. It's an external, it's a Sage, another Sage program that it's standalone, but can be linked to Sage 100, so it can connect to the GL, pull in GL accounts, balances. So that gives you a lot of power to do like what-if scenarios. If if this increases or decreases, how it affects the budget. Right. So if that's something we can get information. I don't have that installed and configured to show you today, but that is something that is available if that's something that you would like to consider.
Okay.
Transaction is going to be all the transactions. So this is where the transactions posted against this GL account. So you see at the top, monthly expenses. I can drill into the source journal. And if you ever need to reverse something out, you see these reversals. This little button here. Now I can have, when I create a general journal entry, I can have an automatic reversing date to have it create the reversing entry for me. But if something's entered that needs reversed that didn't have a reversal date, this little button here, the little blue little, it will create a journal entry for me. So that just created a journal entry in GL journal entry. So if I leave here and go into general journal entry, I'm going to use the flashlight lookup here, and you see this. So the system generated this for me with that little button. So that was 17 lines of data entry that I didn't have to do. So it's not posted yet, but it created the entry, so I can review it and I make changes or go ahead and post that. Now, let's say that I needed to do, as far as a general journal entry that you need to enter, this would be the process. This would be the same place, you know, that generated it for me, but let's say I need to create one. Let's say I'm going to do one for bank rec. So I just take BR as my register, entry number, posting date. I can specify a reversing date and a journal comment. I go to lines. It's going to be pretty straightforward. Account number, description, debit, credit amount. So I'm going to pull in my debit line. Down. And then I come down. I'll set that with regulation.
Can you type in under the account number? You can type, what if you start typing in like travel or something?
Same as you saw before.
That's what I want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah. So you can start to type the description. Now you can always too, you can use the lookup here too, like we did on, you know, and then search by what you know. But that little description thing is, you know, is available here to find what you're looking for.
Now this is, what if you know part of the number? So, you know, like depending on.
Type as much as you know.
Yeah.
Key in as much as you know, and then F2. You can't see me. I'm hitting the F2 button, and that's like a begins with. And then I can pick the appropriate one from there.
Okay. I have a question on the reversing.
Mm-hmm.
So first, if you hit reversing when you were in that other screen, it didn't have you put in the date that you wanted it reversed?
Well, that was a posted transaction that I didn't have a reversing date associated with it. So I was essentially manually reversing that.
Right.
So I just said, hey, I need to reverse, like, that was a manual reversal. It wasn't automatically set up for it.
Right.
In this case, if I wanted this to be, you know, here's where I could say next month. Now I've associated a reversing date for this transaction.
Right, but if it's one that you wanted that wasn't set up as a manual or as an automatic reversing and you wanted to reverse it, is it in the screen before it's posted that you would then select what date? Because you may want it to reverse in the current period, or you may actually want it reversing in the next period. You just forgot to make it a reversing entry.
So the posting date is the date. So it created it, but that's the date. That's the accounting period that's going to be posted to. So that controls what accounting period that gets allocated to.
Right. So yeah. So then before it got posted, someone would have to go in there and make sure they changed the date if they didn't want it to be the date it kind of defaulted to.
Correct. And I have it, again, one of my preferences is to use my system date as my posting date. So I could override that and always prompt for the posting date. I have a preference set to use my system date as the posting date.
Yeah. Okay. And could that be set up by individual?
Yeah. Yep.
Because someone might always want it to be the date that they are currently in, and then if they want it to be a different date, they manually change it. But other people might want it where it always prompts the date.
That is something that you can set up on a user basis.
Perfect.
Now, these entries, The reversal that the system created and the one I just entered, notice that they're setting here, they're in data entry, they're not committed or posted yet. So it creates the entry, so it's not committed. I'm going to hit the printer icon, and it gives me an opportunity. So you see the general journal, and now I can review this. So this gives me an opportunity to see the entry printed out. So the bank rec one that I entered, the reversal. If there was a problem after reviewing this, I could say no and go back and correct it while it's in data entry. If everything was good, there was no problem, I would just go ahead and say yes. Now it's committed. So if I go back to general journal entry and use that flashlight lookup, no entries. So those are now posted and committed.
So you have to do, so you do that through that process. There's no, okay. Okay.
Now you do have, I can do data entry. Library master, I can schedule updates. So if that's something you want, you want to do data entry, and you want the system to update it, I can schedule updates that happen automatically. What's nice about that is it gives me the opportunity, in that process, I review it. It gives me a chance to catch a mistake. Because if I post it with the mistake, I have to reverse it out and repost it. Previewing that gives me that opportunity to get one more chance to make sure it's correct. If I see something that's wrong, I could say no to the update option, go back and fix the mistake, and then rerun and make sure it's correct and say yes to post it when everything is good.
Right. So instead of, because I was thinking more of it from having a user permissions where someone puts it in, they can enter, but they can't post.
Okay. Yeah. So you could do that too. So in that case, you would give them access to entry, but not the register. So you would give them access to the entry, but not the posting process where it gives you the print and say yes to update.
Right. But they could still run a general ledger or something and see it to see if they, like someone said, oh, I might have put it in backwards, and before I tell you it's good to post, let me go look. They could still go look at a GL register or general ledger and see if they put it in correctly.
Yeah. And then it's just that they wouldn't get that prompt, do you want to update, unless you give, yeah.
Perfect.
Now also I can create recurring journal entries, transaction journals, kind of, the same process. I would just say, again, source journal, entry number, all the details here, bank codes. So again, depending on how you need that, data entry is pretty similar throughout the system. Questions on maintenance or entries?
Nope, I think that's it. At least that's all I have.
Let me go to reports. Now, what's nice is you have different reporting tools. Now, anytime we're in Sage 100 and we have the reports menu, the reporting engine that's used to create these reports is Crystal Reports. So let me just run a trial balance here. Now, when I run this, I have control here. I want ending balances, beginning, activity, what type of balances to print, include or exclude zero balances, print condensed. So basically landscape or portrait, with a little more information. An account or range of accounts, specific accounts or departments or locations. I can put criteria in there. I'm going to just preview. Now, what's nice is I want to point out anytime I preview a report, so it's a preview of the printed screen, notice this little button up here. If there's reports that you want to work with the data in that report, I can come here, say export, and then choose to, let's say I want this to go out to Excel. So I can actually take the contents of this report, and if I say disk, it just saves it as an Excel file. But if it's an application, it will actually give me another kind of formatting screen. I'm just going to keep the original here just to kind of show you, and it will open up. It will basically take that and put it into a spreadsheet. Now, not to say that it's always perfectly formatted, but if you need to work with that, it does get it to a format that you can copy and paste and do things with.
Gotcha. Okay.
And again, that's always from almost any preview. So preview the report, and from that report preview option, you have that export button. Now, let's say if that report, let's say, this report is nice, but, if I could just have it a little different formatted, that's where if I use this drop-down box, go to Designer, those can be modified and saved. And what it would do is create a new menu called Custom Reports. And that customized version of that report would be accessible under Custom Reports. So if I wanted, add a field, change something around, change the sort or grouping, I can actually open up how that standard report is defined, apply my changes, and save it as a custom report, and then access it from the custom reports or add it to my favorites menu if that's the one I want to use more frequently. So I can modify the standard reports and save them as custom versions of. Questions there?
And if you save those as custom versions, does everybody see them? Or do you only you as your user?
It would depend. So again, that would become a menu item as far as permissions that their user role could access or not. So you would have to give them permission to access that through security. Now, I will point out here too, we have, let's say, the financial reports. These are crystal based. So, balance sheet, income statement. When I run these, it's going to run all three. So I'll run one. When I close one, it'll run the next. So it'll start with the balance sheet. And again, I can do some customization here. These are all designed to, again, I'm looking at a preview of a printed page. In this case, let me just go to the last page. You can see all the, total equity, liabilities, kind of giving you that detail. Again, preview of a printed page. So I can't drill down or drill into these reports. I can export and manipulate the data, but I don't really have drill down capability. So now it's going to run the second of those reports, the statement of cash flows. Let's just scroll down here. And then the last of those three reports. And again, these can be customized with Crystal like we saw. And I can have a custom version of this. But what's nice is there's another tool that comes automatically with this system that may be a little more friendly for financial reporting and other reporting as well. So again, any report you see here under Reports menu within a menu is Crystal Reports. Now, another thing that comes with Sage 100 is Sage Intelligence Reporting. The Report Manager is the report authoring tool. I already have it launched down here. So what you'll see here, this was added to Sage 100 as a financial report writing tool, but it's not limited to financial reports. I can do AR reports, AP reports, there's a whole variety of reports that I can run. This tool, instead of Crystal, is Excel-based. Let me ask you this, are you proficient? Are you an Excel user? Are you intermediate or an expert level?
Well, let's just say intermediate. I never want to say I'm an expert because I think there's so much that product can do that.
Okay. Well, I bet you more, are you even intermediate in Excel, probably super beginner in Crystal. Crystal's not the most convenient report writer. What's nice about this is it's Excel-based, but the connection to Sage 100 and Excel is already made for you. So it's not like you have to take a blank worksheet and manually dump information into the worksheet. It can pull directly from Sage 100 into the worksheet. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to start with the financial report designer. Now, in this case, we're looking at a balance sheet. I had run it already. Now, in this case, where I mentioned before, in the Crystal version, I previewed that. I was looking at a printed page. Now, what's nice here, because of Excel, I have summarized view by category, assets, but I can have the full view of all the accounts under that category. And I even have the ability, right-click, drill down to drill into, and depending on the report and where it came from in this transaction, even drilling down to the I'm gonna get an error. I'm not sure if this is set up for it. Yeah, but if this, I can drill down. Yeah, exactly.
So like if it was an AP invoice, you could probably see the journal entry and then maybe drill into the invoice.
Yeah. Check number, check like a payment, like the check number, the invoice, the vendor number, et cetera, the comments associated with that transaction. Now, what's nice is, let's say, again, I'm looking on the balance sheet. Let's say I want to tweak this. So now there's different things. You have the task pane. So this would, balance sheet, this is what I ran. If I want to trial balance, I click this, it's going to generate that layout. Now it's going to be blank because my fiscal year, I just need to change my fiscal year. So as soon as I change my fiscal year to reflect where my demo data is setting, there's my data, folded in automatically. Let's say I don't like this format. I want to change the format on any of these. I can hit manage. And then I can say edit. I can pick the one I want to edit. And then I have the ability to drag and drop. So rows, columns, spacers. And then if you get into, how, your GL segments, department, cities, locations, including, excluding specific departments or locations, can be done with the reporting trees. Questions?
No, it's good.
So let me kind of show you. Even let's say, now I have the task pane. I tended to gravitate to this because it's out here on top, but it also creates this BI tools add-in. So quick generate is exactly the same thing. So if I need a balance sheet, so it's just a different way to do, what this just did, generate the balance sheet, the trial balance, et cetera, or edit one of those. Now, something I want to point out that's not available here, that is over here, distribution settings. So this would give me the ability to set up, let's say, generate this report on a daily basis and deliver it to the CEO, the CFO, et cetera. So you can build these reports and set up who should get a copy of it, and then use Windows Task Scheduler to basically initiate the report generation and delivery to the recipients who are assigned to that report. So it's waiting for them when they get into the office in the morning. Questions?
No, that's good.
If you like to do your own thing, just to kind of show you, I can even go to tool under this task pane. So blank worksheet, account list. This will populate my GL accounts into, so here's my GL, so that just pulled all the GL accounts in, so I can get rid of any column that I don't want to have over here. And then I even can, now it's not just as simple as this, but I can do so I pulled the opening balance. Now I have to do a little more. I'd have to go into that formula and give it the range of, rows and columns to look at to incorporate in that formula. But we provide tools that if you prefer to do your own thing, populating the GL accounts, pull the GL account list in, you can pull the formulas in, you do the specific details of the formula, which columns and rows need to be looked at. But we provide tools that if you want to do your own thing, you can. Now, aside from the standard reports, there's different dashboards. So just, profit and loss, top 5 expenses. Now, items do not come into play for you since you're not selling items per se. But, you could take this, if you are versed in Excel, like, oh, that's nice. How did they get to this? Anytime you have these pretty output reports, if I right click, unhide, all the worksheets that were used to generate the pretty output are typically hidden. So you can kind of sleuth it out, unhide the worksheet and go in and see how this was created by unhiding the worksheets that were used to generate it. So, this type of tool can be generated. One that I like to show is this report is not installed automatically. It's available for free, but it's kind of a combination of the financials, because it's incorporated in the financial details, but it gives it to you in a dashboard format. So it's kind of nice. I want to look at period 4 or period 3. I can just, take the period I want to look, and it updates that graph. And then there's, different ratio reports and trends that I can go to. This report, again, isn't installed automatically. There's a tool called the report utility that allows you to kind of review the reports that are available, give you a description and a preview of what that report would look like. And then with that utility, you can choose to download that to the system. So we'll pull it from the web and install it for you. But you can kind of preview and say, I want that one, and it will add it automatically through using that utility. Questions?
Yes.
Now, I've been in the authoring tool just to kind of show you. Users who don't have rights to create the report, again, so this is the tool where, someone creating a report would go. Someone who just needs one of those reports would access that through the report viewer. And these will be basically, they can't change or modify the report. They would just pick the one that they want to run. And again, maybe I would, create a favorite for my viewer so I could go to the specific one. Or maybe you're emailing the user the report that they need versus having them try to find it in that in the viewer. Questions?
No, yeah, and I could see where you would limit who can create reports because it could just become voluminous and it'd be stuff that you really don't want.
Correct. So any questions in GL or intelligence reporting?
Nope.
All right. Let me ask you this. Do you want to go into accounts receivable or accounts payable?
Accounts payable.
Okay. So let's go in and look at vendor setup. So let me ask you this. Do you have 1099 vendors?
Yes.
So that is something that you, if you need 1099 in options, you enable. You basically say, I need 1099 vendors. Which company code am I in? Now, just like before, oh, that's why I was looking for a customer, the vendor list. So I'm going to pull up, now just like before, in the vendor number field, if I know the name, I can start to type their name into the vendor number field. You get the name and then the number. So you have that option similar to the account description, in this case, the vendor name versus the number. I can always use the lookup and, phone number, zip code, address, whatever field I know I can use for the lookup. I'm going to take Airway. Airway in my demo data is my landlord. So notice we have a feature called memo maintenance. I have this memo here, and the reason this popped up is because it's set to always display. So anytime I pull up this customer or this vendor record, this vendor is always going to open up because the memo is set to automatically always display. If that was set to never, this just being highlighted tells me that a memo exists, but it doesn't necessarily have to always pop open, as you'll notice that this new one didn't open. In this case, the new one has an attachment. So I've attached a document to the memo, so I can do attachments and view that attachment from. So if you have a contract or my rental agreement, maybe I want to attach instead of my landlord, so I can have quick reference to that external document through the memo and an attachment. Questions?
No.
All right. Main tab, address, terms code. Let me ask you this: do you pay vendors? You do any ACH payments? Is that something that would be convenient to do, or is it all paper checks?
No, we do ACH.
Okay. So in this case, you can see they're flagged as electronic payment. So I just flag and, hey, this is an ACH vendor. Now, in addition to that, I need to come here, and then electronic payment is where I would specify the bank account, the routing number, the type, and then the pre-note details. So what you'll notice is, as I demo later, I'm going to say generate check, and it's going to say, hey, they're flagged as an electronic payment vendor, but you are not done with the setup. So it's going to revert back to a paper check because I don't have a bank account, the routing, or the pre-note. So it's going to double check to make sure that that information is available, even though that's not, essentially that's, it's flagging it as an ACH vendor, but I still have to supply those, routing number, bank account type, and do the pre-note for that.
So that if you forgot, it would generate a paper check.
Correct. It will give you a little note on the check register saying, you flagged them as electronic payment vendor, but the pre-note has not been sent, so a paper check will be generated.
Yes.
Do you pay any bills with credit cards?
Not really.
Okay, that's what this little checkbox is. What that would do is enable me, for example, I could create Amex as a vendor. I would check that checkbox. So if I went to pay Airway or another vendor with my Amex, I could have my original invoice denoting the purchase activity with that vendor, so it's categorized correctly. But if I use Amex to pay that vendor off, what it would do is transfer the balance from that vendor to Amex, and of course I would pay Amex, a month later when that bill was due. But it gives me the ability to set up a credit card as a vendor, and then I can use that to pay other vendors, and essentially what it does is kind of a balance transfer. It would zero out the vendor with the balance and then move that balance over to the credit card that I used to pay that other bill with. Notice this med class, that is not a standard. That's an example of a custom field. So in this case, this vendor had, this was a medical demo I did, so they could classify the type of doctor's office that vendor was in the past. So you can have custom fields. That's just an example of a custom field being associated with a vendor record. Additional tab is going to be vendor status. So if this vendor ever went out of business, or maybe they merged with another, I could say inactive and merge or bankrupt, or whatever reason they went out of business. Default GL entry for AP. So when I go to do an AP invoice, it's automatically going to default this GL account to that AP invoice line since it's my landlord. That's typically what I want. 1099. So if I enable 1099 tracking and options, it gives me the ability to specify on the vendor the 1099 vendor type, default form, taxpayer ID, and it will start to accumulate the 1099 history for that vendor. At the end of the year, you can generate 1099s, and even there's an option to electronically file to a service called Atrix. Questions?
I do have a question on the GL account. Do you have to populate the GL account?
If there's nothing there, it wouldn't default. It would just, you would pick the GL account on the AP invoice data entry line.
Okay.
Now I can always, Airway's my landlord, so 9 times out of 10 or 99.9%, that's the appropriate GL account. I could always override it. It doesn't mean I can't delete that account from the invoice if that's not what I'm doing.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't. Yeah, because there's good things depending on what it is. There's good things about having a default account in there, but then sometimes if you're in a hurry and it's some vendor that could have multiple accounts, you might want the AP person to actually type it in.
Yeah. So in that case, if that is going to be, if it's like the landlord, you may want the default. If it's a vendor where it may not always be the same thing, just leave it blank. And this is optional. It's kind of like it's a nice to have.
Right,
now you can also statistics is kind of the activity information, like last purchase date, last check number, payment data, payment amount, your average days to pay, overdue balance, and your aging for that vendor. Summary is going to be period-to-date, year-to-date, prior year purchases, payments, discounts, taken or lost. You can look at any period or year in history. History is going to take an entire year, break it out by a period, purchases, payments, discounts, taken or lost. I can do prior year. So now I have prior year columns. Turn that on or off. Invoices, probably going to be one of the more frequently accessed tabs. At the top, you get invoice number, invoice date, due date, the amount, the balance. Now notice when I select one of those at the top, at the bottom, it will populate the transactions associated with the invoice at the top. So in this case, we see the invoice when we entered and posted it in AP invoice data entry, and then the fact that we generated a payment in the form of check 1721 on 5/31 and applied it to that balance. So you would be able to see payments, adjustments, et cetera, at the bottom if they had been applied to that invoice. Now, let me see if I got anyone that's, now notice this is enabled here at the top, depending on the invoice. If that invoice is in history, I can zoom into and drill into the detail to see exactly what was on that particular invoice. Questions?
Nope.
Sort any column by date, due date, amount. You just click on the column and it'll sort by that column. Transactions is all. Now, what I like to say, this is a great, let's say you have a dispute with a vendor about how they applied your payment to invoices. Sort by the check number. So you see your check number, the invoices that should have applied to. So you have that information kind of in a good way to have that conversation with the vendor. He will even look into bank reconciliation to tell you whether the check has cleared the bank yet. So it's kind of linked to bank rec. If that clears the bank rec, that cleared flag will flip the yes and show you that. Checks is going to be all the payments. And again, I double click to drill down to more detail if I need to. And purchase orders, I didn't see that listed. Do you, purchase orders is issuing a purchase order to a vendor? Is that something you think?
We don't use,
okay.
We don't use purchase orders.
Okay, so we don't need to go there. And let's see, I'm just going to show you contacts. You can have multiple contacts per vendor. So this would just be where you would set up, your contacts at that vendor and have, the specific title, phone number, extension, email addresses, any notes associated with that particular vendor. So again, I can have more than one. I can also do, purchase address, remit to address. Now, where invoices here, those are the open, I call them open invoices. They may be zero balance invoices. You can determine, let's say you want to see a zero balance invoice for 1 month after it was paid. So what happens is during period and processing, the system will say, how long has that been in a zero balance? If you say retain zero balance invoices in the open invoice file for 30 days, during period and processing, it will check to see a zero balance invoice. If it's been zero balance for longer than 30 days, it moves it from here, from this invoice tab to history. So this invoices inquiry here is the invoices that have been paid have been at a zero balance for longer than longer than 30 days or 60 days. So you can say how long you want to see a zero balance invoice setting on that invoice file. After it exceeds the retention period, it is moved from the open file to the history file. It can be accessed through this inquiry.
Okay.
Questions? All right, so that's the vendor setup. Now, if you needed to, I can create a custom tab. So if there was information that I needed to create for a vendor that didn't fit on an existing screen, I could even create a custom tab and add custom fields to that custom tab. So just kind of keep in mind, I'm not, limited. I had that one little, small little here's, I added a custom field, but in some cases you may need lots of information, not have room for it. You can create a custom tab and, since there's nothing that Sage put there, you have the entire screen to use as you need to. So any questions on vendor maintenance?
Nope.
Now, let me just go, I'll do, if you have repetitive invoices that, like rent, or maybe it's a an IT bill or something of that nature, the same a subscription for some kind of service. You can repetitive invoice entries where you can define that repetitive billing. We'll just say do airway. So I can define, again, maybe this is the rent. So I can set this up as a recurring or repetitive invoice, and notice that it will track, the invoice amount, how many, the billing cycle, when to start billing, how many payments, how many times it's been billed. The lines tab is, again, the geo account, the amount. I can have that description. And let me ask you this. Notice I can have a, if I wanted to, I can have expense, I can distribute that across multiple expense accounts if I needed to. So I can have a default distribution of that expense across multiple geo accounts if that's functionality that you needed. Questions?
No, that's good.
So this is just, creating that recurring invoice. Now what I can do is, when I need to generate, if I go to invoice selection, remember there was a billing cycle, so I could say, create all the invoices based on all billing cycles or a specific billing cycle. I'm just going to say, proceed. And then if I hit the printer icon, it's going to show me which invoices it's going to generate for me based on, so in this case, all these invoices would be created. I'm not going to actually follow through on this because I want to show you manually. But again, you can kind of see, it's going to generate these multiple invoices for me if I said yes to generate.
Okay.
And I'm going to say no. Now, manual entry, invoice data entry. So let's say we'll go back to Airway. So again, just like before, I can just start to type their name. Their defaults will pull in automatically. I'll just say, oops, I'm a good tenant. Now here's where, if I needed to define that table, I could pull in that, distribute that expense across multiple tables, override any details, flag, 1099 details, hold payment, separate check, lines. So again, the default here is that if I didn't have that default, I would have to look up and select the specific GL account that should be associated with this. Now, what I want to point out here, anytime you see in Sage 100 the data entry screens, let's say this is not something you use. I don't have to have that up here. This involves another module that you're not using, fixed assets, so that's not something I need to see. This allows you to you can drag and drop. So you put the data that you need to see in data entry where you want it. If for whatever reason I wanted the description after the amount, I could do so. You just drag and drop and put it where you want that column to be. I'm going to put it back. And it remembers how you organized and laid out the data entry screen, and every time you open it up, it will be the way you had it the last time, and the way I organize it doesn't impact anyone else. It is specific to me. Okay. Questions?
No.
So I'm going to hit accept, and just like before, that is in data entry, but it's not updated. So I don't know why I'm not getting the full screen there. There we go. I'm going to hit the printer icon. So this again gives me that opportunity to, now notice that my current period in my demo data is May of 2020. So today's date, the default date based on my preferences, it's giving you this warning. Falls into a future GL period. I can do that. That's no problem. I can post to that future period. Now I'm just going to show you an example. If I go back to 3/31/2020, I can't post to a closed period. So I get that warning. It says, hey, that's a closed period. You cannot post to a closed period. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that within my current period for my demo data. So no problem. It's not future. It's in the current period. And I'm going to preview. And again, this gives me that opportunity to make sure everything's correct. And if everything's good, I can say, yes, I want to update. So those invoices have now been posted and are open payables on those vendor accounts. Questions?
No.
All right. So I'm going to go into check printing electronic. So I'm going to do invoice payment selection. Now I can go in and create a specific payment for a specific vendor and invoice. This allows me to say, show me which invoices are due based on an invoice due date. So I can select by the invoice due date, the discount due date, or both. I can do something like this little number. Ask for forgiveness and not for permission type of a thing, right? Just take my discounts. Now from here, I can come down and enter a vendor or range of vendors or more detail. Do I want just paper checks? Do I want just ACH, or do I want both? And, override the default and just do paper checks. Now what's nice is, so I've entered criteria. So when I hit select here, this is based on the dates that I have entered. These are all the invoices that fall into, that are due based on the date that I had specified on the previous screen. Now I can hit select all, or I can use control or shift select to say, we want to pay this one and this one. So I can use, control to say which ones I want to pay. And then I can go okay. And then I'm going to hit the printer icon down here. And basically it's going to show me based on other demos and this demo, which invoices are ready. So check entry 1 for this vendor, all the invoices that have been selected for payment, comments. Now here's where here's that little note. Hey, you have not yet approved the pre-note. so it's reverting back to a paper check. So that's kind of the note. Hey, this has been flagged as an electronic payment vendor, but the pre-not's not been approved yet, so it's going to revert back to a paper check. Now, after this, it will, I can look through all that. Do you want to print checks? I'm going to say yes. And this gives me that option again. Do I just want paper? Do I want ACH or both? And then now notice I can have it when I hit print. I can do my paper checks, and I can also set it up to email remittance advice to the ACH vendors. So I can email remittance advice to them for the ACH payments. I'm just going to keep it at print. I'm going to just preview. Let me ask you this: on paper checks, are you just filling in the blanks on preprint, like the payee, the amount, and the date, or you have completely blank stock that you're printing everything on?
Well, I believe our third-party provider just has blank stock, so
Okay.
we'll have to figure that out.
So we can set this up to fill in the blanks, where I would just be putting, like the date, the amount, the payee details onto existing check stock, or it can be designed to print every little bit of ink that needs to be printed, including microcoding if that's required by your financial institution. So again, this is just each check. And
yeah,
then
if anything, I mean, we maybe do, I'd still probably order it with the accounts at the bottom, just so they wouldn't have to do it via the micro printer. But
yeah. So, I mean, we can accommodate either way. Now, I won't be able to update that because I didn't physically print the checks.
Right.
So I
have one question: is it in when you're putting the information in for the invoice, where you tell it that I want a separate check per invoice versus collapsing all invoices to one vendor on one check?
Yeah. So
when
you create yes, separate check. So on the invoice, if that needs to be a separate check, you would check the checkbox when you generate when you're entering the invoice, flag separate check.
Okay, so it doesn't do it on the print side. It does it when it asks to print. It does it on the invoice entry. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. And you get a whole set of, again, you have a whole set of reports here, trial balance, age invoice report, again, standard. We have samples of all the standard reports, so Brian can send you a PDF that has a sample of every report that comes out of the box. We'll kind of give you an idea where you may need customization. So any questions on accounts payable?
Nope.
We'll go ahead and move over. Now, did you want to look at AR?
No, I have to think of. So the only reason I would think that we might use AR is our payments, or pulling our information from our royalties from our franchisees. But I don't know if that might actually be more cumbersome than the way we do it now. So but AR comes with the package, right? So I could make
Correct. And the setup, I'll just kind of show you. You'll see immediately the customer maintenance. Notice how similar it looks to how the vendor is set up. Main tab, tax schedule, credit hold, credit limit, terms code, additional information. How do they pay? Their last payment date, last payment amount, high balance, their balance. Year to date, prior sales, history. Invoices, and I can drill into invoices, transactions. So very similar in setup and functionality, but this is a customer instead of a vendor.
Right.
Let's see here. So let me go. Now let me ask you this: bank reconciliation. So this would be I can define the banks. Let me ask you this. On banking, do you have one of the big banks like Chase or Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or is it more like a regional, local bank?
So we use Regions, which I don't know, I guess.
Seems like I've heard of them. Why I ask is because there's different. I can come in here and I can define the bank code, and I can manually checks. If I generate the AP check within AP, it's going to be here. Now notice the cleared flag. So I can manually, take my bank statement and manually reconcile this. If you can get a file from Regents, I have the ability to see this auto check reconciliation. That gives me the ability to create a mapping to the file provided by Regents so that I can import that file. And if the bank cleared in the statement, it would clear it automatically through that import process. So it would automatically clear a check. So instead of having to manually clear checks, I can import that file from the bank. It would recognize the cleared bank and clear it automatically for you here. Or I can actually link, and Regents, I'm not sure, I've actually think I've heard of them, so they may be a big enough a player that we have a tool, and I don't have a live bank to show you, but I just want to kind of show you what I can do is from here, if I go to more, see this connect bank feeds, this gives you the ability to actually connect directly live to the bank. So let me go to my desktop here real quick and kind of show you. I have screenshots because I don't have a live bank account. Let me close out all these extra windows. He's been pretty quiet today. Let's see here. So here's where, I say this bank code, and then I can connect to pick the bank. And then once it's connected, so this is just kind of the connection process. So once it's connected, it'll say, hey, this bank is connected to bank feeds. And then instead of having to do that manually or import a file, I can say get bank feed. So when I click this button, it would connect to the bank directly and import transactions from the bank directly to the screen. If it exists in both places, it would automatically, so if it was recorded in Sage 100 and it was on the bank statement, it would automatically match it. If it needed your attention, it would flag the things that, hey, you need to take a review. You need to review this transaction. If it was, and it tells you, essentially, did it come from the bank or did it come from Sage 100? If it can match it, it will, but it defines the source of this was from Sage 100 or from the bank, and will flag the things that need your attention for reconciling. Questions?
I like it. Worth checking into for sure.
Yeah, and someone's like, how many? You can do that as many times as your bank refreshes the data. So any questions there? Oh, it also has positive pay, so you can actually export a list of checks generated by Sage 100 to send to the bank, so that it's not something you used to hear about it on the news, all the check washing. You haven't heard that on the news in a long time, but I'm sure it's still out there, exists. They're just not on the news as much. So you can provide that list of the check numbers, the amounts, the payees to the bank. So hopefully, if they get one that was intercepted and washed, they have the information to not honor it because you've given them the positive pay.
Right.
Let's see here. Now, anything that you expected to see that we haven't talked about? Any other questions or any areas we need to drill into?
Yeah, so we would actually use the fixed asset module. So
okay. So let's see. So fixed assets. So fixed assets is a separate Sage program that has integrations between Sage 100 and that program. So let me kind of show you. If I go to fixed assets, now what's nice is fixed assets, what I'm going to do now is actually launch the other program. So this is going to show me, I'll just let it launch. I'm going to get let me close this out. I'm going to get a window pop up here in a moment. So it gives me an asset snapshot upon launching fixed assets. So just kind of the different, tax books, and, I can take, different looks at different things, look at different tax books. So I can, I can always come back. I can always open that later. So this is essentially all my active assets. So down at the bottom, if I drill into one, you get 7 tax books. So tax, internal, state, AMT, ACE. 2 custom ones are available. Each one can have its own depreciation method, extensive amount of depreciation methods. That's really one of the questions for your accountant, which one you should pick. Now, in-service date, acquisition value. You can do transfers. You can do disposals. Now, notice here at the top, GL expense account. Those are GL account numbers from Sage 100. GL asset account, accumulated depreciation, all that detail. Now, integration point wise, I can create assets directly here. So I can add an asset. I can, replicate, copy an asset. If I buy another of the same thing, I can replicate that asset and, have new system numbers for the new assets, but basically copy or replicate existing ones. Another nice thing is, if I'm going to go back to, to Sage, integration-wise, remember when I was in invoice data entry and I said the asset template? So if you buy a new asset, when you record the asset, I'm going to go with, oops, I don't want them. I picked the wrong one. I want to go with compact. I'm just going to do my invoice. So when I buy the asset, I actually have the ability that if the GL account number on the GL line is a fixed asset account, let me just get my bigger here, I can specify an asset template here so that I would be doing two things. I would be creating the payable to pay, to pay Compaq $1,000 for this laptop I'm buying. Let me just do the update process. So in the update process, it is going to, on the first part of the update, is going to create the payable in accounts payable to pay Compaq for that purchase, standard AP. Mm-hmm. Then after I say yes to update, it will give me another little status screen giving me, I have something wrong with my template, but essentially I have something wrong and I have to go back and look. I'm invalid GL account or something, but I can actually have that. The asset template gives me the ability when I record the purchase and AP invoice data entry to actually have that create the asset in the fixed asset database. I have some kind of error condition that
I think
didn't let that happen.
You have Compact and Dell. Maybe that's the issue.
No, it doesn't care about that.
Okay.
Because that's just a vendor. It doesn't realize that Compact is a different computer system and doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
There's lots of things wrong with this invoice.
I know, it's like Compact, but you're buying a Dell, huh?
Right.
But it would, normally be, number one in the value, and it would create it automatically. So instead of having to, create the invoice and then go and create it in fixed assets, it can actually create both at once. So just recording the purchase can create the asset in the fixed asset database. Now it also, you're not using PO, so if I had two laptops, I would have to create two GL lines. So, I don't have a quantity field available in AP invoice data entry. So if I needed to create two, I would have 2 lines or 3 lines if I was buying 3 laptops. Questions?
Nope. That's what
Now, another probably more critical thing is the depreciation itself. So when I depreciate my assets, I can say, I'm going to just say all complete assets, and I can say internal, and then I can, basically I'm going to say the through date on the depreciation calculation. So fixed assets is going to calculate the depreciation for all my assets. And this is probably the more critical integration point. Once this depreciation is calculated, so this is the depreciation run. I'm going to probably have to back up one page. So $2 million something of depreciation. So it calculated the depreciation. So now probably the better part of the integration is the back end. So now if I go to fixed assets and go to period end processing, what will happen now is Sage 100 will go to fixed assets grab the depreciation that was just calculated and create the GL entries.
Yeah, that's nice.
So I get the, per asset, and then the next screen will be the GL entry. And again, probably going to tell me why now I can't post the other one. I have invalid GL accounts on my register or template, but it will generate the GL transaction for me. So again, that's probably the big time saver there. Questions?
Not on that.
Okay. Any other areas that we haven't touched base on that you would need to have a look at or have questions about?
So we are, instead of under like a 445, we are on a 13 period calendar. So every period's 4 weeks.
So we can do, how many periods? You had 13?
Yep.
So in fiscal year maintenance, you can have 13 periods, and you would define your start and end date.
Perfect. And do you have to define like every year, or does once you roll over, does it kind of memorize what the prior year was?
Yeah, so it would basically follow.
I know for reversing entries, once you hit the, if you're having a reversing entry in say period 13, how do you set up in do you already have to have period 1 of the next year set up so it knows what to do with that, basically, is why I was asking.
So you can see when I created 2022, it instantly pulled in the same setup. So if it was 13, if my setup was 13, 2023, 2024 would automatically do that. Now, I believe that if you go to do a reversing entry or even key in a posting date, the fiscal year has to exist.
Right.
Yeah. So if I key in a 2023 date, I'd probably get an error that fiscal year doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. Okay. But if you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you.
But I could go create it and then go back, and it wouldn't be a problem.
Right. So if you were in period 13 of 2020, but nobody had remembered to go set up 2021 yet, and you were trying to do a reversing entry, you would get some sort of error saying that 2021 doesn't exist, which would then trigger somebody else to go make sure 2021 calendar was set up.
Correct. And then that's just, again, in fiscal, let me hit accept here. So if I come in here, you can see I have 18 through 22 defined.
Gotcha. Okay.
And you can specify the start and end date of each period?
Yes. So if you had, if this needed to be 3/15, I could have 3/15 instead of. So that's just it defaults based on
right.
the
traditional calendar, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can't think of anything else at the moment.
All right. Any?
Nope, that's all I can think of at the moment.
All right.
Okay. Well, I've got it all recorded for you, both of you. A few things I still owe you that I haven't forgot about is the scope of work from the consultant as well as the cost to host it all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still waiting for those. As soon as I get them, I'll forward them your way.
Okay.
So that way you'll have it all. But if there's something that we did forget about, shoot me an email with it, and I'll get it addressed for you.
Okay.
This little dashboard option, you can decide if a user needs the dashboard and what piece. So this is just something, keep in mind, kind of a quick view, what's going on in GL, and then related reports can be run from here, or I can, kind of hover over or get more detail. So you would, basically if a user needs to have this information, you can enable the dashboard and determine here's where I can say essentially this user is allowed to say what they want to see on the dashboard, or you can just build it out and this is what you get. So this is where I can say what I'm seeing on this dashboard, and maybe this needs to be at the top, I can move it up or down. And the more important things at the top, the less important things at the bottom. I can say what's on it and where it appears on the dashboard. And that's kind of a user by user, whether the user needs a dashboard at all and what they can see on the dashboard, even if that user is allowed to modify their own dashboard.
Got it. Okay.
And Jerry, I sent you out the out-of-the-box canned crystal reports for financials only.
All right. That's perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining. John, thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
And like I said, as soon as I get the scope of work and the cost to quote, the cost to host it, I'll send that your way.
Perfect. And do you have any idea of like maybe when you might have that information?
In a day or two.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, you all enjoy the evening. You're welcome. Take care now.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
There he is. There's my boo. 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 And the boo. And the boo.
Is really not good in the sense that, as you know, we have been in a situation where we're averaging about 20,000 new cases a day, and then a series of circumstances associated with various states and cities trying to open up in the sense of getting back to some form of normality has led to a situation where we now have record-breaking cases all over the place. I disagree. You said don't wear masks, and I said, well, please. You said numerous things don't feel it. You had a great week. No. I didn't hear that. Didn't listen to my experts. What was another headache, Dr. Patsy, there? The virus spreading in the United States. So is there anybody who's not named Trump in Congress or in the administration or the White House that agrees with the president's assessment of how things are right now? Based on my conversations with the president's advisors, it's clear the new chief of staff, Mark Meadows, is one of the people behind the scenes, along with President Trump, encouraging this idea that the country should continue to reopen, that the country needs to, Americans need to internalize the circumstances here and the challenges ahead to keep moving forward. And that goes against the message from Dr. Fauci. But we don't see Trump advisors, from Meadows to others on the political side, trying to have a dramatic public brawl with Dr. Fauci, because they know if he somehow had a break with the administration or left the administration, it could cost them political points. So you see this tension continue, but the president is moving forward with his own message, despite what Dr. Fauci, who is a nonpartisan figure, is saying. Well, let's look at what you're just talking about, and that's tough. Look at this polling. The CDC, we'll put it back up on the screen. 70% of all people in the country, whether all those polls in the country, trust the CDC. 67% trust Dr. Fauci. 26% trust President Trump. Carol, you know that Trump, his internal poll numbers of the campaign are not good. He's not winning in anything. How do you feel that? I guess what is the motivation for the president to go after Dr. Fauci
company who has all of that trust, or the TV team that has all of that trust. It's basically their only play, President's only play, is to push full speed on reopening, on the economy. That's what he's been trying to do, and it's been at odds with experts like Dr. Fauci for months now. This is just the latest example of that. So the problem that the president runs into when he tries to do this is pressure states faster than they want to is one, Dr. Fauci and others have laid this out. You see it fighting cases and perhaps will be restricted in terms of reopening. Because the other thing is that he doesn't have the kind of control over this process that he thinks that yes, police all good for sure, and they can put out their recommendations, but the states are going to decide. The funding, it's unclear what funding he could even pull from the states for education, and whether he could even get Congress to go on board with that. So a lot of this is the president applying pressure in ways that he may find out that they're not going to go the way he wants to, and if they do, it could really backfire all if it turns out that sending states with pressuring to open fully, and that's what they're saying, fully, not part-time, is that causes a new fighting case. The virus is not a political opponent, and treating it as such, as the president has been doing, is not winning politically for him, at least not now. Probably, thanks very much, Robert Thompson, and Dr. Stephen Patel, thank you as well. Coming up next, frontline workers, or ahead, frontline workers are sounding the alarm about communications and not enough personal protective equipment. We're going to check in on two of the hottest hotspots. And later, the Supreme Court is ruling on Obamacare that could affect well over 100,000 women. The employers now allowed to opt out of covering contraceptives. The time is coming for us to get out and go again, to visit all the places we didn't know meant so much. But we're all going at our own speed. At Enterprise, peace of mind starts with our complete pledge, curbside rentals, and low-touch transactions. With so many vehicles for so many times, you can count on us to help you get everywhere you want to go. Again, whenever you're ready, we're ready for you. Enterprise.
Good music there. Fantastic. Come on back and just a blurry photo. Now, so check out my RV. It's a four-wheeler. There's no parking and water to see.
Well, the fact helps people save when they come to their homes and out of their vehicles. So it's another thing to do now, isn't it?
Yeah. Serious boots. That's not really deep. How did it help you?
I just increased my score by 8 points in Syrian boots. My score is going to help me save money on a new car, which I have had a one.
Boost your credit score is hitting. Please download the Experience app now.
All my friends at home.
Good morning. Yep. Come on, good morning. The secret's not outside.
So we want you guys. 3, 2, 1. That's what I'm talking about. So is that about everything we did out in the talk about, guys?
Some small businesses don't have their offices in government. You won't find it. But for over 20 years, we've been able to find it all the time. Book the best local pro for online with that. Selling a home, expensive and stressful. So we set out to create a better home. The network of the most successful real estate agents in America. They'll sell your home to real estate. Yeah. We say $4,000 a commission.
They were so stress-free, the whole process of making that I was having that.
We are not a discount broker. In a proper way, they'll give you best results. actually seeing early indications of a percent of positive testing flattening in Arizona and Florida and Texas. Others in each of those states have taken strong steps to flatten the curve.
Talk about how the Trump administration may be trying to put a positive spin on the situation in some of the country's hotspots. A quarter of COVID-19 tests in Arizona are coming back positive. 25%. That is the highest percentage in the country. Texas, meanwhile, reported more than 10,000 new cases yesterday. It was the first state that nearly 2,000 more cases and Texas is city of structure was set last Saturday before winning a number today. Moments ago, the nation's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, suggested in an interview with the Wall Street Journal that states experiencing serious problems right now. They want to take the drastic step of shutting down. For more, I'm joined by ABC Patterson today, and our own digital content is Houston. Steve, simple question: is the terror stop moving in Arizona as well as others today?
By all indications, that is not happening. From health workers, hospitals, frontline workers, say the number one thing that they need is more bodies, more people in these hospitals that are already packed, nearing capacity. But one indicator that you have to look at, you already mentioned that quarter positive rate among all the cases. That means more than just what it sounds like. It also means, according to health officials, based on that Johns Hopkins study that found that essentially the testing is so low that it is not accounting for people who are not sick, right? So when you have 25% of people testing positive, it means it's not getting to a full group that is asymptomatic and may not have symptoms. And that speaks to the fact that there is not enough testing being done on the ground. And you have situations in which you essentially have blind spots. And that speaks to the fact that there may be more community spread over a much longer sustained time. Let's say, since the middle of May when the stay-at-home order lifted, to where you have a situation where you are blind to where the disease or the virus is spreading at this point. So health officials are really worried about a few things. They're worried about, obviously, that community spread. They're worried about, obviously, the test positive rate, but they're really worried about having people on the ground. This is better health. They're running a drive right now. You can see the car behind me, people getting tested. They say that they can do about 1,000 a day every single day, but that's when for getting the test back, it takes them 5 to 7 days for people to see the results. That is not salient for really tracking or knowing the spread of this virus. We'd like to see the virus and test results back within 2 days, but because the sites are so slammed, the hospitals are so slammed, the labs are slammed as well. So it is a real flaw in the system here, especially when you have this severe spike in the number of cases. This terrorism continues and it's scaring everybody here.
It could go this line of term, but there are less tests. We just don't have the visuals. I don't know what we know or say that. So similarly, here in Texas, the governor has said in the past that we would be concerned about a 10% positivity rate in testing. Right now, the state of Texas is at a 13.5% on average positivity rate. What are you hearing from the governor now? Okay, that positivity rate did sort of urge the governor to go ahead and make some changes. We saw him close bars a few weeks ago and also roll back capacity on restaurants from 75% to 50%, but that does not seem to be enough. You mentioned those record daily numbers that we saw just yesterday. Those numbers are continuing to pick up. We're here in Harris County. It just crossed the 40,000 people who tested positive for the virus back threshold. It is the hardest hit county in Texas. And now business owners here are very concerned about remaining open regardless of what the governor has said. I talked to a handful of business owners today, specifically restaurant owners that actually closed their doors voluntarily, some of them, because they are concerned about these surging numbers. And others are considering that, but they want to see more aid from the government. And they say that right now, this pandemic is a partisan sort of argument that doesn't need to be happening in lives on the line. Take a listen to what the owner of the Breakfast Club here told me.
Unfortunately, we have this pandemic into a issue of
And so restaurant owners here are urging their local elected officials that they go back to Washington, D.C. To stop the restaurant tax, which will actually allow for $120 billion in funding to help keep these restaurants afloat. They decide whether to remain open or close and look at their utility numbers and what they doing in that because it will be okay so long as you get the restaurant we just said something about capacity, or we mentioned about capacity that some of these states where the hotspots are, maybe consider shutting down. Is that even under consideration in Arizona?
I had the director of public health of Arizona on the phone the other night. I asked that question directly to her. She said that yes, that is an option on the table. It is not as if we are completely negating the state health order. But the fact of the matter is they're relying on messaging. They're relying on outreach. They said that will be a last case scenario. That they'd like to exhaust all other options before they go there. You know, if it's all about social distancing, this is all about the things that we heard from the federal government at the very beginning. Why not do it now? Because anything you do will last for another 2 weeks. And they said they're sticking to that. So we'll see if the strategy works, but it's not looking good.
There were studies done on what happened here in New York, and they found that if we had shut down a week earlier, 2 weeks earlier, thousands of lives would have been saved. Just a week or two, and thousands of lives. So every second counts when you're battling the spread of this virus. Patterson, thank you very much for something they do as well. And a little more news out of Texas today. The Republican Party of Texas canceled its in-person convention scheduled for next week. There were a lot of people wondering if this was still going to happen. 6,000 people were expected to attend the Harris County event in Harris County, currently the state's biggest coronavirus hotspot. With other convention news, we're recently had the senators not going to the Republican convention is growing. 5 senators now say they will not be going to Jacksonville next month. Chuck Grassley, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, and Lamar Alexander. Senator Grassley, who is 86, said he'll be sitting out because of the coronavirus. Senator Collins has a different reason, though. Aides say it's the long-running tradition to skip the convention when she's running for re-election. Senators McConnell, Graham, and Braun, however, all say that they will be attending next month. Harvard and MIT are suing the Trump administration, fighting back against White House plans to force some international students to leave the United States. We'll be right back.
Hey there, people eligible for Medicare. Give me 2 minutes, and I'll tell you some important things to know about Medicare. First, it doesn't pay for everything. Take this kid. Is your Part B medical center. This function, about 80%. Medicare will pay. What's left? This right here. Well, that's on you. And that's for an AARP Medicare supplement insurance. Insured by the United Healthcare Insurance Company. Like how we did your plan, you'll have every to choose any doctor who accepts medication. Great for some who want to know, or finding somebody new, like a specialist. There are no networks and or referral needed. None. And you travel 3 times per week, like anywhere in the country. So, for another state, and they want to enjoy, those you'll still be able to see any doctor who accepts medication. So call me now. Hey, time for a wrap-up. A Medicare supplement plan helps pay some of what Medicare does. You know, it allows you to choose any doctor who accepts medication, and uses only plans at the time forced by a doctor. Call me now today
online dating. I know people think that way, but where are you to begin? Open laptop, go to ourtime.com, look for free. It's easy to take a look on Our Time, the fastest growing dating site for people over 50. If you have not heard from your development, little things become your big moment. Let's focus on Tesla. Tesla is not a cream. It's a pill that treats psoriasis differently. With a Tesla, 75% clear skin is achievable. This is bigger than important. The animal severe diarrhea cannot be overcome. With Tesla is associated with an increased risk of depression. Undiagnosed, you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts or acute feelings of illness. Some people taking on Tesla your doctor should monitor your weight and make some treatment. Other respiratory tract infections may take other doctors on your
My eye doctor would never take a 5 period. Eye doctor? I don't think so.